Hello, I'm Meredith Westbrook, and this is the oral exam portion of my final exam. I find that my personal work centers most around linguistically diverse students, so looking at it through that lens and looking at the objectives for our course. The two objectives that I've chosen are listed here. The first one, analyze the influence of culturally responsive or unresponsive environments on the psychological, social, and emotional development of culturally diverse students in gifted programs. And two, demonstrate cultural competence in working with gifted students from diverse backgrounds. So with objective 1, students who are unable to cope effectively with injustices or prejudice of any kind are unable to work effectively in school. Learning is seriously hindered. Persistent racism conquers the spirit of victims. Ford goes on to say that too many racially and culturally different students, even those of high ability, receive negative feedback and comments about their intelligence or their ability or potential to achieve academically. These low expectations, which may come from teachers, parents, or peers, weaken their self-concept and their pride, which again makes it more difficult for them to work effectively in school. So I think that as teachers, it's definitely important to think about that and to remember this, always have this in our mind. Looking at figure 8.2 from our Ford text, I've been reflecting on this a lot and reading through the comments under the microaggressions column. I've done a lot of thinking about how many times have I heard something similar to those comments. Like the one, that I'm not racist, I have several black friends, or saying something like I'm colorblind. While I think the intention of a lot of people when they might say something like I'm colorblind, I think they're trying to say that they're accepting of other people. But what I had never thought of, and what this has opened my eyes to, is that at the same time, while saying that, the message is that you're, denying the person's racial or ethnic experience. So I think that would be a good thing for teachers to think about and to point out to them, to anybody really, but especially for an education for these purposes of teaching students. Another one that jumped out at me is the first one, where it says, you speak good English, where you're from. Where are you from? And the message behind that is you're a foreigner. And that stuck out to me a lot because it made me think that I might need to change a conversation that I have with students. When students first enter my room, not on the first day, but just within the first couple of weeks, we talk about language and, where is Spanish spoken in the world and how did it come to be that way in South America, Central America. And so we'll have these conversations. And then one of the things that we'll also talk about is that we shouldn't make assumptions about people, and that as Americans, unfortunately, we often have the tendency to look at a person who looks Hispanic and assume they're from Mexico, when in fact, it could be that that person has family who's lived in the United States for generations. It could be that that person doesn't have family from Mexico. Maybe their ancestors came from El Salvador, or maybe they came from El Salvador themselves at some point in their life. And I point out that sometimes we have a tendency to assume that it's all the same thing, and that I've heard students make comments like, you're from Mexico, and then the kid will say, no, I'm from El Salvador. And then the student responds, oh, whatever, it's the same thing. So we'll talk about that. Is it the same thing? Is Mexico the same as El Salvador? And we'll compare that to, is the United States the same thing as England? And we'll have these conversations about how, in the same way that you might be offended if someone assumes you're from another country, so are the people that you do that to. someone who's from El Salvador is probably proud to be from El Salvador. They're proud of their culture, their heritage, their family, and they don't want to be mistaken for someone from a country that perhaps they've never been to. So we have these conversations, and my suggestion to them in the past has been take the time to get to know the person. Ask them where they're from, perhaps, rather than assuming. But now I'm looking at it from a new perspective of, well, maybe there's a fine line to walk between asking questions about where are you from and truly wanting to get to know the person without sending a message that you're a foreigner, and even worse, sending a message you don't belong here. So I'm thinking now we need to also include that in the conversation so that students are sensitive to that going forward as they meet others in their school or wherever it may be. So looking at this list, I was thinking this would be great to share with faculty at school, because I'm sure they have either had some of these thoughts themselves before, or they know people that have had these thoughts, or they've seen students say similar things, etc. So it would be a great thing to point out. Regarding Objective 2, Ford has some suggestions for eliminating curricular biases. And I find that I do some of these things already, but that I can do better. And one of those that I'm going to really strive to do better on is build a sense of community. This fall, I plan to do some action research. I come from a background of doing a lot of team building activities with campers as a camp counselor or camp director. And I have been doing these games and team building exercises for many years, so I have a lot of practice. And I started thinking, what if I intentionally try some of these same activities in my classroom in order to build community? And I think this year it'll be even easier than it would have been if I had tried this in the past, because my class sizes are going to be much smaller. We got redistricted, and I actually saw my class numbers today. The lowest class has 18 kids. The highest has 23. So I'm used to 35, 32. If I'm lucky, sometimes it's 28. So it's going to be a whole new world for me as far as that goes. But I think it'll be much easier to incorporate these team building things. And my hope is that when we do this, some of these other things are going to fall into place, that we will increase empathy for one another by doing these activities. We'll increase understanding of one another. And also through conversations, we'll address prejudices, address generalizations versus stereotype. I hope to increase more self-understanding and pride within the students. Before I move on to future plans, I wanted to add this too. I really like the Ford-Harris matrix, and I plan to use that with lessons going forward. Take lessons that I already have and build on it, incorporating those elements, because I think that is great. So I'll start small. Just take one lesson at a time, build that one, see how it goes, take another lesson, build on that, and just try to keep improving it. Now for future plans, focusing on Objective 1, I would like to continue my own self-reflection. I feel like I've been able to do a lot of that through this course, which has been great. Thinking about what I write in my posts, reading other posts has helped me reflect a lot. And I would like for other teachers to do the same, because, how often do we really take the time to just think about what we're doing? And, I know that it's easy as teachers for us to get overwhelmed, but I think it's important for sure to encourage this reflection and just see, what are the things that we're doing right? How are we doing in this area? And how can we make it better in other areas? Future plans continued. With Objective 2, Catano states that the goal of multicultural education is to produce citizens who will be able to think critically. Through this, they'll be able to recognize social injustice. Students will then be able to work toward the creation of a more equitable society as their personal choice dictates. Whether it's through literature, current events, history, art, music, whatever it might be that we're talking about in class, I think it's important to have the courageous conversations with students. And the use of the Ford-Harris matrix, I hope, will help me for sure become a more culturally competent teacher as I'm thinking through what we're going to do with these different units and lessons. For networking and collaboration, I'd like to talk to the counselors at my school about raising awareness of culturally responsive and unresponsive environments and the impact that those have on our students. I'm curious to know their thoughts. Are they already thinking about this kind of stuff already? And 2, to talk with my professional learning coordinator about developing a course on cultural competence. And what I mean by course is that in my district, the way we've started doing professional learning is online through courses. So it's kind of like what we do right now with our courses at UGA, except we don't actually have a professor or anything. Someone develops it, and we'll meet in small groups and do these together. But we will upload responses and things, and then we're going to have a system that's going to start tracking our courses that we complete, and then they'll submit that to the Professional Standards Commission for our recertification. But I created a course actually last spring that's going to be used at my school this year. So hopefully that's going to go well. And after we do that one, then my hope is that the professional learning coordinator will let me try another one. So those are usually 6 to 8 modules. So we could talk about the best way to do this. Do we want to do one just on cultural competence? Do we want to do one just on culturally responsive environments? Do we want to combine things? So I think it would be good to meet with the professional learning coordinator and the counselors and brainstorm ideas on the best way to go about this so that we can help our teachers. So I thank you guys for a great semester, a great summer, and good luck to everyone this year.